All right, so today we're diving into a paper called GRACE, Generalizing Robot-Assisted Caregiving with User Functionality Embeddings. Kind of a mouthful, but it's a fascinating look at how robots can help people, with everyday tasks.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a robot that could, help you get dressed or make a meal.
But not just a robot that does the same thing for everyone. This is
Yeah.
talking about a robot that can understand your specific needs.
Right, like it adapts to how you move.
Exactly. So it's personalized care, basically.
Yeah, and what I think is really cool is it uses information that's already out there, like scores from occupational therapy assessments.
Oh, interesting. So therapists use these to understand a person's movement abilities.
Right, and Grace kind of takes that information and translates it so a robot can understand.
That's brilliant. No more needing those expensive motion capture suits.
Right, exactly. And they call this functional range of motion, or FROM for short.
Okay, so it's basically what you can reach comfortably without needing help. So how does this GRACE thing actually work? Is it super complicated AI?
No, not at all. It's actually like a pretty straightforward process. Think of it in 3 steps.
Okay, I'm listening. 3 steps.
So first, Grace takes a look at those assessment scores, and it creates this kind of functional fingerprint.
A fingerprint, like a snapshot of your ability.
Exactly. A personalized profile for your body and how you move.
That's really cool. So then what?
So let's say you want to do something like reach for a cup. Grace combines that information about the movement with your fingerprint.
To see if you can do it on your own.
Yeah, it predicts if the movement's possible.
And if it's not.
Well, that's where the robot can step in. Grace tells the robot how much assistance you might need, to make sure you can grab the cup safely.
Ah, I see. But wouldn't it just be easier if the robot did everything for you? Why all this focus on individual abilities?
That's a great question. And I think it really gets at the heart of what makes Grace so different. It's not about, replacing human ability.
So it's more about providing the right amount of support.
Yeah. So people can still be independent, do as much as they can on their own.
Oh, that's a really important point. So it's about dignity and empowerment too.
Exactly. And to actually train Grace, the researchers needed a ton of data.
Makes sense. You got to feed the AI, right?
Exactly. And to do that, they created something called DataGRACE. It's a data set that links from measurements to those functional scores.
Oh, so they basically had to map out how the scores translate to real-world movement.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting. To get that data, they had people emulate different conditions using resistance bands.
Oh, so it's like trying to reach for something, but with a band making it harder to move.
Yeah, like if you had arthritis or something. It's a really clever way to mimic those limitations.
That's really smart. I mean, it'd be way harder to find a bunch of people with all these different conditions.
Right. And here's the best part. They made DataGRACE open source.
So other researchers can use it too.
Exactly. Which is huge for this field. Everyone can build on these findings.
That's awesome. So they've got the data, they've got the algorithm, but does it actually work? In the real world?
Well, to figure that out, they did a bunch of experiments. First, they wanted to see how good Grace was at predicting for new users.
People it hadn't seen before, so a real test.
Exactly.
How'd it do?
It did amazingly well. It could accurately predict someone's range of motion just from their scores.
Wow, that's impressive.
It even did better than a model that already knew the person's specific condition.
So it's picking up on those subtle differences in how we all move, even if we have the same general condition.
That's right. Although it did struggle a bit to distinguish between people within the same condition, so there's still room to grow.
Maybe by using even more types of assessments to get a more complete picture.
Yeah, I think so. There are always ways to refine the system, but it's definitely a huge step towards personalized robots that can actually help people.
And it's just the beginning, right? There's so much potential here. But before we get carried away, I think we need a break. When we come back, we'll talk about how we got here, the history of this kind of research, and what led to this breakthrough. Stay tuned.
It's really amazing to think how quickly this field is changing.
Yeah, I mean, robots helping people with personal care.
It seemed impossible not long ago.
Totally. But research like this GRACE paper is making it real?
It is, but it took a lot to get here. Robotics has come a long way,
Yeah, but for a while, it was mostly about robots doing tasks really precisely.
Like on assembly lines.
Right, like robots welding car parts. Super efficient, but not very human.
Exactly. But to have robots in our homes helping us.
Especially with something like caregiving.
You need them to be more than just efficient.
Yeah, they have to adapt, be responsive, understand people.
That's where AI comes in. Combining robotics with machine learning, suddenly you've got robots that can learn and adapt.
And that's great speakle.
Yeah.
Right? Not just following instructions, but
Mhm.
actually learning about a person's needs.
Precisely. And a few big trends made this possible. Like we have way more data now.
From our phones or smartwatches, even just being online.
All that data can be used to train AI, like Grace, to understand us better.
It's like teaching a robot to, well, not read your mind, but get pretty close.
Right. And the algorithms are getting smarter too.
So it's not just having tons of data, it's knowing how to use it.
Exactly. And we're getting better at that all the time.
Plus, people are realizing that robots have to be designed with people in mind.
It's not enough to just have a robot that can do a task. It has to do it in a way that makes sense for the human.
Like handing you something in a way that's safe, comfortable, makes you feel good.
And Grace is a great example of this new approach.
Using data, smart algorithms, and designed with real people in mind. It's setting a new standard.
It really is. But you mentioned ethics before, and that's important to think about.
Yeah. What are some of the potential problems with this tech?
Well, Grace uses personal data about someone's abilities.
So we need to make sure that data is protected.
Exactly. Privacy is huge. We don't want robots selling our data or anything.
Right. And what about bias? If the data used to train the AI is biased,
Then the robot could end up being biased too.
that's a big one. We don't want robots that reinforce existing inequalities.
Absolutely. And then there's a question of who's in control.
Like, how much decision-making should we give to robots? Especially in something as important as caregiving.
It's a tricky balance. We want robots to be helpful, but people need to stay in control of their own lives.
These are all really important questions.
They are, and we need to keep talking about them as this technology keeps developing.
Absolutely. But for now, let's move on to something a little more fun.
You mean the novel notions?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've been thinking about where this research could lead. What are some of your ideas?
Well, one thing that really struck me is, what if we could use AI to not just understand current abilities, but predict how those abilities might change over time?
Whoa, like a robot that can anticipate your future needs.
Exactly. Imagine a system that looks at your medical history, your lifestyle.
And it figures out how your mobility might change in the future.
Yeah, it could predict if it's likely to improve or decline.
That could be huge for creating personalized care plans. Not just reacting to changes, but getting ahead of them.
Think about rehab after a stroke. The therapist could have an AI telling them how the patient is likely to recover.
Wow. So instead of just relying on their own judgment, they'd have this personalized prediction.
And think about what that could do for the patient's motivation if you could actually see a path towards recovery.
Yeah, knowing how your abilities might improve over time, that would be so encouraging.
And it could help set realistic goals, so you're not constantly feeling disappointed or frustrated.
This could apply to cognitive function too, right? Like early signs of dementia.
Absolutely. And AI could help catch those early signs and suggest interventions.
That could make a world of difference.
It really could. And again, this wouldn't replace human experts. It would just give them more information, better tools.
It's all about using AI to improve human lives, make caregiving more effective and personalized.
Exactly. And while there are definitely technical and ethical hurdles,
The potential benefits are just too big to ignore.
couldn't agree more. This is a really exciting area of research, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Me too. And I'm sure our listeners have thoughts as well. What are your hopes and concerns about personalized robotic care?
What possibilities do you see?
We want to hear from you. So join the conversation and share your thoughts. We've spent a lot of time talking about, how Grace personalizes care based on someone's movement they're from.
Right.
But it makes me wonder about other things that could be personalized.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Grace is really focused on those physical abilities.
Exactly. But people are so much more than that.
It's true. What about their preferences? How comfortable they feel with things, even their mood?
Yeah. Like, could a robot ever understand that stuff?
I mean, it's a tough challenge, but there's some really interesting research going on, like AI that can actually detect and respond to emotions.
Really? How does that even work?
Well, there are systems that analyze things like facial expressions, your tone of voice, even like tiny changes in your body.
To figure out if you're happy or sad.
Exactly. It's still early days, but it's getting pretty good.
So imagine a caregiving robot. It sees you're having a bad day, moving slowly, not really talking much.
And it changes how it acts, maybe offers some encouraging words or just kind of hangs back and gives you space.
It's like almost a friend, not just a machine.
That kind of emotional support could be so important, especially for people who are lonely or maybe struggling with, memory problems.
Definitely. It's more than just the tasks. It's about how those tasks make you feel.
Exactly. But of course, we got to be careful here.
Oh, yeah, the ethics stuff. We can't forget about that.
These systems have to be designed really thoughtfully, with empathy, to protect people's privacy and dignity.
We don't want robots reading our minds and then gossiping about it.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, technology is only one part of the solution.
Right? Human connection, real caring relationships, those are always going to be essential.
It's about finding that balance, letting tech help us, but not take over.
Absolutely. Well, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with this kind of tech.
There's so much potential. Personalized care, robots understanding our needs, even our emotions.
It could totally change how we think about aging and caregiving.
But it's not just about the tech itself, it's about the values that drive it.
Right. Making sure everyone has access to it, that it's used ethically, that it truly makes people's lives better.
It's really up to all of us to shape this future, to make sure it's a good one.
Couldn't agree more. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into personalized robotic care.
And Grace.
I hope you learned something new today, got excited about the possibilities.
And maybe even started imagining how this could change your life.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time.
See ya!